Hello there. The entire production team of Political Focus joins me, Samson in Yaoundé, to invite you to today's program. The countdown has narrowed into a few days and a few hours. Cameroonians are holding their breath, and expectations and anxiety are running high in view of the major national dialogue that takes place in Yaoundé from the 30th of September to the 4th of October 2019 to address the bloody conflict in the northwest and southwest regions of the country. The about 400 delegates to the dialogue have since been converging on Yaoundé with ideas and proposals on how to tackle what is now on record as one of the most bloody chapters in Cameroon's post-unification history. In fact, prior to the day of the dialogue, Prime Minister, Head of Government Joseph Dion Ngute spent the last more than 2 weeks receiving individuals and delegations submitting proposals on how to solve what is now known as the Anglophone crisis once and for all. Public declarations made by those received by the Prime Minister have generally been indicative of the preference for dialogue as the way to go. Yet, some of the declarations have clearly betrayed the ignorance of some Cameroonians about the complexities of the crisis and the veiled intentions of some groups and individuals to take advantage of the dialogue and the crisis to acquire either personal material or immaterial gains for themselves. After all, experts in conflict management, conflict resolution and conflict transformation have warned that whenever a crisis breaks out, like the one in the northwest and southwest regions, conflict entrepreneurs or war entrepreneurs always get in to make sure that it doesn't end so soon for them to remain in business. They are like vultures that always hang in the wind to enjoy from the misfortune of a cattle rearer. Such people don't care about the lives that continue to be lost, property being destroyed, and all forms of trauma being experienced by the populations directly affected. This is the more reason why delegates to the major national dialogue must rise up to the challenge and public expectations. They who have received the confidence of the head of state to turn over this sad page of the country's history. And so the task ahead of them is to help pick up the broken pieces so that Cameroonians should not continue to remember the plebiscite of 1961 and the tripartite conference of 1991 with regrets and tears in their eyes. Stay tuned. I will be back in a moment. Welcome back. Let's now refresh our minds on the main political news events of the week as reported by the newspapers. Charles Tembe read the newspapers and prepared the following review.
The pre-dialogue consultations at the Prime Minister's office continue to be the headline story in newspapers. Cameroon Tribune reports that proposals keep flowing in as peace groups plead for amnesty to be granted to all those arrested and detained in connection with the Anglophone crisis. The Guardian Post says one of those receiving audience, human rights lawyer Agwo Mbala, insists that separatist participation must be on the agenda. In a separate audience, Fako traditional rulers revealed that separatist fighters in Fako division say they will participate in the national dialogue via telephone conferencing. Le Gédion reports that Christian Cardinal Toumi presented a 400-page document to the Prime Minister in which he called for intellectual honesty by participants in the national dialogue. The Sun newspaper says there are recurring proposals from the Northwest and Southwest, among which are a 10-state federation with elected governors, a rotating presidency between Francophones and Anglophones, and for the national dialogue to have a neutral mediator. On its part, Mutation reports that the Anglophone problem and crisis is competing for attention with concerns coming from other communities in the country. The paper reports further that the PM is working under the overbearing influence of the CPDM elite. The Post publishes a 6-page special of what it terms national dialogue melodrama, and The Horizon asks who wants to torpedo dialogue, saying while PM John Gute is busy collecting proposals in view of the national dialogue, detractors have resorted to distractions and greedy agendas. That'll be it for Political News Review this week.
Charles Tembe with our press review. The past weeks have been very busy moments for Prime Minister Joseph John Gute, who spent longer days receiving individuals and groups coming up with proposals for the major national dialogue that starts on the 30th of September 2019. The proposals are aimed at solving the ongoing bloody conflict in the northwest and southwest regions, as well as other problems in Cameroon. But while the Prime Minister was receiving the proposals, 8 themes on which the dialogue shall focus were made public. In the light of the themes, Sam Bukuba captures some of the key declarations made by some personalities received by the Prime Minister in the following report.
The Prime Minister, Chief Dr. Joseph John Gute, continued pre-dialogue consultations this week when internally displaced persons thronged the emergency center in Bamenda to register their names for humanitarian assistance. And these ladies' distress call that sums up the desperation of many for an urgent solution to the Anglophone crisis.
They're treating my life and the life of my husband and the life of our children. Adding to our first daughter, they kidnapped. I am a debtor in Bamenda. I don't know where to take money. I paid a ransom and they still need to take my son. My son cannot go to school. So I'm praying that our president, Pobia, should make a way to solve this problem.
With a solution to the Anglophone crisis eagerly awaited, Mr. David Abuema Choi, a consultant in governance, thinks there may be more to bite than chew in the pre-dialogue consultations.
My fear is that through that consultation process, we may have to grasp so many things and we won't have time to examine them all. When you grasp too much, you may lose too much. Grasp all, lose all. So I think we should focus on what is most urgent in our country to bring back peace, security, and harmony in Northwest and Southwest.
Honorable Joshua Osi is Vice President of the Social Democratic Front and one of those received in audience by the PM. He says there should be no diluting the Anglophone problem in the groundswell of concerns expressed by other groups and communities across the country.
It is obvious that this national dialogue is because of the Anglophone crisis. So we have a political responsibility to make sure that it doesn't become dissolved in other problems. And if it's a dialogue on the Anglophone crisis, then the main stakeholders should be those suffering from that crisis, the Anglophones themselves.
The representative of the Northwest and Southwest Peace Movement for the Cessation of Violence, Barrister Ngale Monono, is for a ceasefire, an amnesty, and peace and reconciliation among Cameroonians.
We are craving for a ceasefire. Secondly, we are craving that people who have been locked up, incarcerated, and imprisoned be given either a presidential pardon or a general amnesty so that they take part in the consultations. We're also saying that we need a peace and reconciliation committee so that the Cameroonians can bury the hatchets and reconcile among themselves.
Mr. Eric Chinje, a well-known media personality, says the purpose of the national dialogue must be properly defined in relation to peace and the challenge of change.
I think we need to have a full understanding of what it is. My take is the purpose of this dialogue is to determine the price of peace in Cameroon. And we shouldn't miss that, to determine what needs to change and how are we going to deal with change. Are Cameroonians, 25 million and more of us, willing to accept change? Somehow feel change has to come from Yaoundé, change has to come from the president. No, it's far more individual than that. The dialogue is about the Cameroon we want. And the question then becomes, what is the Cameroon we want? And every one of us should ask ourselves that question.
For Professor Willibrod Zengwa, the paramount preoccupation should be how to manage the outcome of the dialogue going by past experiences.
As far as the outcome, the result of the dialogue is concerned, I think it were important for us to have some third party. People who should be neutral or Cameroonians, not necessarily outsiders. Cameroonians could have been molded. If we want to make it indigenous, some Cameroonians could have been put in place to be side by side with the Prime Minister to be able to ensure that the outcome of the dialogue will be implemented to the latter. I think that is important. When people talk about the fact that there should have been a third party or neutral personalities, it is because history has proven us right. Those who think that way. Because we had dialogue before in Fumban, the outcome was not fully respected to the latter. We had dialogue after the tripartite, it was not respected to the latter. The outcome of the constitutional discussions which brought about the constitution we are respecting, the 1996 constitution, was not respected to the latter. That is why many Cameroonians were thinking that because we have a severe crisis in the country and because the people of the Northwest and Southwest regions have genuine reasons to complain, it were important, based on past experiences, that some neutral body be put in place to be able to ensure that the outcome be respected.
And it can only be hoped the outcome of the national dialogue will be something to write home about this time around.
Sam Bukuba. In fact, from the opinions captured by Sam there, we can imagine that the Prime Minister might have received as many diverse ideas as the number of delegations he received. Whatever the case, we now try to preview the forthcoming major national dialogue with an expert, Prof Nsoh Christopher. Prof, you are welcome to the program.
My pleasure.
We also have with us Charles Tembe, who is one of us of the team of Political Focus to address the issues. Charles Tembe.
Thank you, Samson. We're glad to be here.
Maybe the first question we put to Professor Nsoh is, you've been observing the way the consultations have been going on at the Prime Minister's office. What is your first comment about it?
Well, we have been in conflict for 3 years today. And being in this conflict, all of us have been calling for inclusive dialogue. So I think the Prime Minister has started by consultation. And he has met so many groups and talked to them. And I believe they are leaving behind documents that he is going to exploit. So I think it is a good idea that consultations should be done to solve a conflict. So I think for now, I have a positive impression, though there are certain reservations.
Can you explain why you say there are certain reservations? Is it the quality of people who are being received, or?
Yes, the quality of people is there as well, because I wanted to see some sort of, for example, people from different walks of life. They are there, but there are some people who are not even part of the conflict process. And that is where I have some reservation. I was expecting that the different parties in the conflict should come together and go to the Prime Minister's office. It is true that they've opened a line for internet consultation where people can send in the information, but I still have some reservation because the process should have been prepared by the parties in conflict. And so that is where I have a reservation.
Professor, who are these parties in conflict? Can you clearly identify them?
Yes. The very first thing you should know is that we have types of conflict. If we're talking about interstate conflicts, then we have states against states. If we're talking about intrastate conflicts, which means conflict happening within states, at that moment you have the state against non-state actors. And non-state actors have become parties to conflict. When one part of the country, for example, the citizens, are unsatisfied because of one thing, they are a party to a conflict. And so I think that this party is supposed to be invited as well. But unfortunately, when I see Siseko, Tambe and Co. in prison, I don't think the softening of the ground is really going to be positive.
Would it have been possible to have Siseko on the table here, given the fact that he has been tried and sentenced?
He was tried and charged because of this conflict. And we know all these issues when we look at South Africa with Nelson Mandela, that he was removed from prison and he played a very major role to resolve the issue of South Africa.
You're talking about the parties to the conflict. You just mentioned about one or two. It seems as if there are even more actors than meet the eye at this particular moment.
You're right. When I talk about parties in the conflict, you have, for example, the government, which is one of the parties and the main actor. Then you have other groups, and these groups have representatives. And even you have those who are in the bushes, the armed rebels. That is another party to the conflict. But, these days, when we talk of a conflict being structured, today we fail to see that with internet, with the recent level of communication, the ICT, people are structuring themselves through this means. It is a method where people are using to structure themselves. And the diaspora are linked up to those who are found in the bushes. So meeting these people in the diaspora is a very good thing. Anyway, I should say that the Prime Minister has created a possibility for some of his delegations to meet with the people in the diaspora. That's as well a positive aspect. I don't know if they are going to do that because I've already heard the concern that so many things are not well done, so they are not going to meet with them.
When you have a conflict with so many parties, what is the best way of involving everybody? Because you talked earlier of inclusive dialogue. The president talked of dialogue without exclusion. Does it mean the same thing?
I will say it means the very thing, but you have to understand the level of the conflict. I've made mention of 2 points. 1, the organizer, and 2, the actors. The inclusiveness comes if from the beginning, if they were all involved in organizing and progressing. The people have the impression that it has been done by one person, and now they want to invite them to come and join on board. And that is where I have some reservation.
We are witnessing pre-dialogue consultations going on. I want to imagine that the Prime Minister, who is going to chair this major national dialogue, is gathering views to see how to fine-tune the draft that they already have. Of course, you want to imagine that you could not organize a dialogue without having some drafting done.
That is our imagination, and if the imagination comes out right, then that is very, very good.
Some people have been expressing the concern that there should have been a halt in the fighting before this dialogue. How can we achieve that?
That is another issue. We call that ceasefire. If I have to go back to interstate conflict, you will see Article 40 of the United Nations Charter. It talks of ceasefire. That's what we call provisionary measures. And in the provisionary measures, we have ceasefire and we have withdrawal of troops from the territory. I am a member of the Northwest Southwest Peace Movement. And we have been calling for ceasefire. First of all, because we know that in order to dialogue in a way that each and every member will feel satisfied, there should be no tension. With ceasefire, it relaxes the atmosphere and creates a fertile ground for people to dialogue. But when there is fire, there is this tension, there is lack of trust and all these issues. So ceasefire is very, very important.
If you are just tuning in, this is Political Focus, coming to you from the national station of the CRTV in Yaoundé. Our guest today is Prof Nsoh Christopher, an expert in peace studies and conflict resolution. We will be back with him after the news. You are welcome back to Political Focus and to our discussion with Professor Nsoh Christopher.
How much ground did you people cover in this campaign for a ceasefire?
We have met so many people. We have been talking with so many authorities. We have been talking to the civil society. We have been talking to the media as well. At least we have brought our position clear in the public.
Did you talk to the state actors?
We do talk to the state actors, and we are going to continuously talk.
What did they tell you in response to your appeal for a ceasefire?
Anyway, this is what is going on. The issue is we talk to them, we exchange ideas with them. You know, they are not against it, but the powers that be must come to terms to see how it's going to be. So that is why at times it is not easy to convince parties in conflict to give up their positions. But we will keep on doing that until when they will hear us.
And then the non-state actors, you also talk to them?
The non-state actors...
The armed groups, for example, did you meet them?
We have met with many of those who are based abroad. We send our delegates, they met with them and talk with them, and they give their own arguments as well, that if they put down their arms, maybe they are going to attack them and kill them. So that is why the tension is going on. So they want the ceasefire to come from both sides.
The approach that is being adopted by the government is the internal approach to conflict resolution or conflict management. Do you think with this particular conflict, the approach that has been taken is the best?
With this particular approach, which is inclusive dialogue, or call it a major national dialogue, it is an approach that is used in such type of conflicts because you bring in all the strata of the society. And if you are talking about the approach, it is the right approach. One, you appeal to the hearts of each and everybody, the communities, the regions, and even the Francophones who are being invited, though they are not part of the conflict. We should thank God that they are not part of the conflict, but they are being invited. When they come in, there are so many things they are going to learn. When they learn these issues, then you see that it's going to change the way people are thinking. So it is not a wrong approach to call for such a national dialogue to solve such a conflict. It is a very good approach, but just that there are certain reservations.
There are some people who have been throwing around ideas of a neutral mediator in this kind of situation, even with the option of having the conflict solved internally. Do you think we absolutely need a mediator in this situation to succeed?
Well, the aspect of mediator is another approach. But this approach of calling for a major national dialogue is what is known as a problem-solving workshop. And from the problem-solving workshop, we'll move to what is known as nested paradigm. That nested paradigm means how do we transform the violence to non-violence. If you go to mediation is another aspect. But what I will tell you is that in this type of a conflict, we call it the multifaceted conflict, which means that many strategies can be put on ground simultaneously. It is not that we finish with this approach before we go to the other approach and things of that nature. So many things can go on at once. So that is why we call it multifaceted. Mediation is very important. Mediation is important because it kills the tension and it facilitates communication between the parties in the conflict. That is why the mediator is very, very important, because his role is to see how to bring the parties together and then facilitate communication, because at the level where we are today, one of the issues is it is difficult for the parties to talk without a third party. So that is the role of a mediator.
And we are approaching this major national dialogue with getting views from across the country. What are some of the issues we would like them to handle during those discussions?
You know, this conflict is a historical conflict, and there is a legal issue in this conflict. Almost everybody is talking about it. It's no more a secret. For example, the talks that the United Nations asked the two governments of the Republic of Cameroon and the authorities of the government of the Southern Cameroons to come together, discuss, agree, and finalize the form of states they would like to have. It was never completed. It is not a secret anymore. Everybody talks about it.
Fumban was not a completed process?
No.
A constitution came out of Fumban, right?
No. It was a constitutional draft that came out from Fumban, and from the constitutional draft, they went to Yaoundé, and from the Yaoundé, they were supposed to meet in a constituent assembly. That never happened. There is one thing I will tell you about this conflict. I have been tracking this conflict for the past 17 years. In all the countries where this conflict has happened, politics has never been played over. So, if we really want to solve it, we should keep aside politics and face the reality, which means that you have to listen carefully to the other parties in the conflict.
You follow this kind of conflict in many places. Can you give us a few areas where they had similar conflicts so that we can begin to learn how they solve it to be able to tackle our own?
You look at Sudan, what happened in Sudan. Look at Eritrea, Ethiopia, East Timor, Indonesia.
Prof, the examples you are citing are examples that are getting some people very jittery.
This is the point I'm advising. Conflict resolution in this type of conflict is very, very dangerous. Because when we talk of resolution, it means that it came to a final stop. And that is why I've used these examples. But we can prevent it from arriving there. We have all the mechanisms.
Or what it takes not to get there.
Yeah, not to get there. That is the worst case scenario. And we have the opportunity now to prevent the worst case scenario.
What should we do not to get there?
That is why I talk of we have to keep aside politics and we face the realities clearly on the ground and we listen to one another. Then we strike a balance. I can come from the position of the form of the state cannot be changed. The other person comes from the position of I am a secessionist. Then you sit on the table through dialogue, discussions. Then you start shifting and you come now in a middle point where you strike a compromise.
In other words, no subject should be a taboo.
No subject should be a taboo. Everything must be put on the table and discussed. You know, formerly we do not have the means of information we have today. Today, everything is in the internet. Everybody reads it every day. And so it has just merely come out. So what do we do when the causes are found on the table? We have to talk over them. And that is the point.
Talking over the issues, it appears we have individuals and groups that have come into this conflict and they seem to be benefiting from the situation, and it will be more or less an illusion to imagine that politics will be kept out of this conflict.
That is what we call war economy. And in each conflict, there is war economy. And when people are benefiting from a conflict, it becomes very difficult for the conflict to come to an end. You know, on both sides, they are benefiting. And so that is why we have to be careful, because as it protracts, it becomes worse. That is why we have to really be honest when we go on the table with dialogue, and we put all the points on the table, not to select certain points and tell us we don't have to talk about these or we don't have to talk about these. We have to talk about those things and ask ourselves, what do we do next? We have to raise the issues, we describe the problems, and we propose the solutions. I repeat, raise the issues, describe the problems, and propose the solutions.
When you talk about this war economy and some people taking advantage of the situation to make capital gains out of it and do not want the conflict to get over, it draws our attention to the issue of representation during this major national dialogue. Some people have said that the majority of the delegates should come from the English-speaking regions of this country.
Well, you're right, but there's one thing you have to know. We have quantity and we have quality. What we have to do is to be honest that people who are coming on the table are people who are come to speak honestly, because we can still bring the majority of the delegates from the northwest and southwest regions, but they'll come and they will not speak honestly.
Who is a delegate of good quality?
A delegate of good quality is somebody who maintains some form of neutrality and say it how it is, and not somebody who come and disguise it because he or she has certain interests or is afraid of certain issues, but somebody who is coming to say, for example, we have lost so many lives, people are displaced, we have diseases, the economy is crushed, and so with this we have to speak the truth. When you do that, then we are on the right path.
You said earlier that trying to resolve a conflict like this is very difficult. That would be the last option. Are you therefore advocating a kind of conflict management to make sure that the conflict is there, but we manage it along as we go?
I like the way you put it. You are right. This type of conflict of diversity, we talk of management. We are talking of management because African states are pluralistic. Either they are in ethnic groups, tribes, or clans. And so, when you have different peoples who have come together to build up a state, we use the mechanism of management and then transformation. Until these mechanisms fail us, which I don't pray it should happen, until these mechanisms fail us, then we go to conflict resolution, which means the conflict will be brought to a final end to the satisfaction and dissatisfaction of one of the parties. That is a resolution.
Now, let us project into the discussions proper. How would you like that dialogue to be organized?
My wish is when they go there, they should go into work groups for people to go and sit behind and build up different points and then bring them and then they discuss them in the General Assembly, and after that they see how to adopt the resolutions. But there's one thing I would say. This is what we call the problem-solving workshop. In a problem-solving workshop, normally there was supposed to be some teaching about the people before we move to all these discussions, so that people should understand what is a conflict. Why are we in this level? Why did people pick up arms? And how can people forgive one another? You bring experts to build up all these issues so that people should visualize those things. And after visualizing them, then you move them into these groups, and then you will see how people will be willing to participate. Because at one time, those who are in a conflict today, they are caught in what we call the conflict trap. When they are caught in a conflict trap, the conflict starts controlling you, not you controlling the conflict. So when you see people killing and doing all this type of savagery that we are seeing, it is not because they want to do that, but now they are caught in a conflict trap and they have to keep on doing that. So people are supposed to understand what is a conflict trap. People are supposed to understand what is a problem about the problem resolution. These are issues that when you bring to the knowledge of delegates, then at one time you reduce the way you are blaming.
In other words, you are imagining a scenario where before people break up into work groups, there are some general presentations by experts.
That is what we call a problem-solving workshop.
Then we move to the workshops.
Then we now move to workshops where people take different topics and they treat them fairly, honestly, and then they bring them.
What is the advantage of the approach that has been adopted by the government?
Well, the advantages are there. They are enormous. Even with my reservations, there are so many advantages. One, it's going to bring so many people together. Two, the different communities at the different levels to sit down and talk. Three, the Francophones who are not involved in the Anglophone problem are going to be schooled in some way or another to understand very well what the conflict is. And four, it's going to change the mindset of so many people. So it's very important. And five, you have what you call the principle of subsidiarity, which means everybody feels that he or she is participating in the process. And once citizens are satisfied that they are participating in a process, then they come out with satisfaction. So these are some advantages that we have here. But for the disadvantages, you have to bring all the delegates together. It is not an easy thing. Two, it is going to be somehow in the public. And when you are handling conflict issues, you should do them off stage so that people should not be having information just like in a market. So that it should be well done behind closed doors and discussed in a very serious way so that nothing filters out. When the parties are coming out, they come out with either recommendations or resolutions.
In this age of social media, is that possible?
Well, these are some of the challenges that we should take into consideration and see that we make it to be fair and transparent enough.
From the way you say, Professor, it looks like we're going to go on with these major national dialogue for a very long time.
You have two possibilities. It can be done once and for all, if everything is done in a fair and transparent manner, or the other way around. But I will say with this type of a conflict, it is not an easy conflict. Because when I take my memory to other countries, I see how many times they held so many of such meetings to dialogue, and after that it went on because this party is not satisfied or this is not satisfied. So let us not build an illusion that this is the only meeting we are going to hold. Let us really remove that from our head. It is normal in conflict. It is not because it is Cameroon. But if anybody tells you that the major national dialogue is going to solve the Anglophone problem, that is a farce. So people should be open to know that after this step, we can still go many other steps.
But we want it to solve this problem.
All of us want it. All of us want it. And that is why we are wishing that from the beginning, it should be done in a way that you attract even those who are skeptical about it to come in and then do their contributions. So we are praying that it goes on well. That is my prayer. I think we should all pray for that.
What will have been the advantages and the disadvantages of having an external mediator in this conflict?
External mediator, first of all, when we talk of mediation, it is good to have somebody who masters very well the scenario. This issue of always bringing in external mediator is really negative because they don't master so many things. They don't master our side languages. There are so many things they don't master. Even the cultural aspect, it plays a role. So they do not really master this particular issue. They don't master the environment and the parties. So that is one of the danger of bringing in external mediators. Then secondly, if you talk about the advantage, you see when you bring in an external mediator, he or she will try to keep some distance and say, okay, I am neutral, I am reserved, I have no stake in the conflict, so I'm going to do my best to take the conflict to an end, to facilitate it very well. So these are the things you can talk about.
So you're asking us to trust Cameroonians, their ability to keep that distance and put the interest of the nation first above any other partisan interest.
That is important, but we have to see into it that the parties in conflict now have to decide who they want to be the mediator. That's one thing. That is where it becomes complicated because the parties in conflict must be satisfied with whoever is going to be the mediator. We still have credible, if not Cameroonians, we still have credible reserve Africans who can participate in it. That people will be satisfied as well because we believe that we are Africans, we have things that we share together in common and all these issues. We can still bring in some Africans to participate in the mediation process.
The person who's going to chair the major national dialogue has already been named. That's going to be Prime Minister Chief Dr. Joseph John Gute.
He is not a mediator. He's going in there as a coordinator of the whole process, and that's what he has already started doing. So consultation, then he will chair the process, and so we should not confuse him with a mediator.
With the reservations that have been expressed by some Cameroonians, especially those who are in the diaspora, how do you think confidence should be instilled in the process so that they can be part of it?
I think the very first thing is to bring them together. It will be advisable that a delegation from the government can meet with them.
They've sent delegations?
They've sent delegations to meet with them. That is where we see how they are going to go ahead. Some of them are saying they cannot meet because from the beginning they were not part of the process. So first thing is to make them become part of the process. Secondly, to decide where it will take place. Thirdly, to come in terms how the major national dialogue is going to take place. And if they insist to go on mediation and the government says, I don't want mediation, then that is some sort of deadlock. Then we'll see how to break the deadlock. But at this moment, the parties should come together and try to reflect towards one another.
Let me get your understanding of being part of the process clear. Many stakeholders have been requesting the President of the Republic to convene the dialogue. He did so. And so everybody is convened to the dialogue.
First of all, it's a good thing that the President has taken that initiative, that he has called for a major national dialogue. That is already something positive will come out from this because many people are going to be schooled, many people are going to learn so many things, many people are going to change their mindset. But when I talk of part of, in a conflict, you have either two or more parties. And when you have two or more parties in a conflict, then if you want to resolve the conflict or manage the conflict, then the parties should come together and decide on how the process is going to go.
Well, Prof, as we come to the end of this interview, in a word or two, what would be your advice to those who will be taking part in this major national dialogue?
My advice is that we have had this opportunity. No matter our positions, we should go there and try to contribute positively, fairly, and transparently, because we wish to have a united and peaceful Cameroon.
What would be the things that will make you disappointed at the end?
If, for example, the points that we all know are not addressed very well, then I'll be disappointed. But if the points are well addressed, then I'll have the spirit of satisfaction, which means we have already moved some steps ahead.
Thank you very much, Professor Nsoh Christopher. You are the head of the Department of International Relations and Conflict Resolution at the University of Buea, and I must say you are also a member of the Northwest-Southwest Movement for Peace that was advocating the cessation of hostilities in the Northwest and Southwest regions. It is all our wish that the major national dialogue will give a headway to what has been a very disturbing crisis in Cameroon. And that is where we will part company for today. The production team today included Charles Tembe, Sam Bukuba, and Nelson Tawe. Our sound technicians were Olive Giselle Eyenga and Guy Joel Noir, while supervision was ensured by Wayne Paul Ngam. For presentation in Yaoundé, I have been Samson Websi saying thanks for listening and goodbye.